Okay, so then they come into your room and they start search procedures. That means they have a clear order which tells them what they're allowed to search. And when we're talking about cybercrime, they will definitely search for anything which could be related to cybercrime. Means computer, external storage devices, cell phone, digital camera, whatever it is. So this is how it is done. Well, but there is one difficulty when it comes to such kind of investigation. You will know. Because if they knock on your door at 6 o'clock in the morning, you have to get up and see them running through your house. You know there is a criminal investigation going on. So if you committed a crime before, you will definitely stop this at that moment. You will say, oops, I'm aware now. They're investigating, so I better stop it right now. And this is especially when we're talking about investigation with regard to terrorism. This could be difficult because it could be necessary for investigation authorities to know what there is going on, what they're planning to prevent it. Let's say there are 10 terrorists, and I'm going to speak about terrorism a little bit later. So let's just say there are 10 terrorists and they want to attack something together. And now you do search and seizure procedures with the one guy in Germany. The others will know, and you will not find out where, or it might be difficult to find out where the attack should take place. So there can be a great interest for the investigation authorities to search a computer system without anybody knowing that a search is going on. So the idea of a software that is installed on the suspect's computer that will enable the law enforcement agencies to access the computer and do search procedures there is an interesting option. It could be an option to the real search procedures where you need physical access to the hardware. So this is really an advantage that we could see for such a software. But the difficulty is, if you really want to do a search procedure, there's one thing that you have to maintain. You have to maintain the integrity of the computer data. If the suspect later on in court proceedings tells you, listen, I've never had these child pornography pictures on my computer, I'm quite sure one of the investigators has placed them there, this will be difficult for the investigators. So they have to ensure that the information on the computer system are not changed, not alterated within the investigation. But if you install a computer software on the computer of the suspect, you're already changing the system. So it is very difficult to maintain the integrity. Therefore, physical access is in general necessary. You cannot search a computer sufficiently and effectively if you don't have physical access. So the possibility, the positive side, if we see it from a law enforcement perspective, the positive side that you are not, that the suspect will hardly recognize what you're doing, is just something that you can use in very few cases, because in most cases you will need much more efficient search and seizure procedures, and this requires physical access to the computer system. There is another issue which makes it very difficult to think about search and seizure procedures, and I will talk about this a little later. The question is, how do we get the software on the suspect's computer? And this was one of the parts where the people who criticized this kind of instrument were concentrating on. And in the beginning, Mr. Schäuble and his friends said, you know, it's very easy. You know, like viruses. See viruses, how many viruses we have and how successful they are. They can install themselves on the computer system of millions of users. So it's not really that difficult. But the thing is, a computer virus doesn't care where you install it. It just wants to hit as many computers as possible. But within an online search and seizure procedure, you would like to install the software on a specific computer. So you need to target this computer, and that is much more difficult. And they realized this. It took them quite a while, and I was wondering why they didn't prepare for this discussion before they started it. But they realized it, and right now what they're saying is, it is very likely that we will not install the software via internet, that we will not transfer it, however, to the computer of the suspect by using an internet line, sending him an email with an attachment or whatever. No, it will be two physical accesses. First of all, we will get into his flat or office or whatever and analyze the computer system, see the operating system, see whatever there is on. Then we will go back and start programming our software, adjusting our software to the system, and then we will come back and install the software. Well, now these guys have not only been there once, they have been there twice. So the normal search and seizure procedure would just require to go there once. Go in, take the computer, go out. These guys have to go back another time, so they're in the flat for 2 times, and they have to ensure that nobody recognizes that they have been in. And I'm wondering how they want to do it, especially when we're talking about people who know how to use the computer. It's very likely that these people will find out what there was going on, that somebody installed something on their computer, even if they have physical access. So I'm wondering where the discussion will lead us, because they're already taking back half of the advantages they said they would like to have, not being forced to enter the flat of the suspect. Now they're taking it back and say, we will have to access this. But one advantage remains, and that is the advantage that they don't have to, that in most cases, the suspect will not realize that there is an investigation going on. This is everything that remains as an advantage from this perspective of the law enforcement agencies. Next thing they really want to have, they would like to have access to your communication. I mean, not your in person. Let's say that they would like to have access to the communication of terrorists and other criminals. So why is that a big thing? Well, when they do regular search and seizure procedures, they will find emails and they will find letters that you wrote and that you stored on your computer, but they will not find data about the communication. For example, if you used voice over IP technology. If you make a phone call over the internet, your computer does of course not store what you are talking about. It might store that you were making a phone call and who you were communicating with and how long it took and whatever, but they cannot store they won't store the content in general. So this is something within regular investigations. When they come to your house, they don't know what you were speaking about previous with other perpetrators. So that could be an interesting thing to know what the people were speaking about while preparing a crime. There is a possibility, we have the possibility to intercept the communication. A standard thing, interception of telecommunication, of phone conversation, as well as data exchange. Law enforcement agencies can ask the access provider to help them to install a system that allows them to intercept the communication, record everything. But the difficulty is that some of those tools that are used for voice over IP communication use an encryption. So at the point of the access provider where law enforcement agencies have access to this information, the information are already encrypted. So they cannot understand what you're talking about. They cannot get into the conversation. They cannot really hear what you're talking about. They only have encrypted files. So as long as they do not in any way correspond with the designer of such software and ask them to hand out the encryption routine and the possibility how to decrypt this information, they will not be able to access the information. So it could be very interesting for them to record the information before they're encrypted. That means right on your computer. When you speak into the microphone, these information should be recorded, and everything that is coming out of your speakers should be recorded as well. So this would be an option to install such a system for the law enforcement agencies, to install such a software on your computer to record exactly these kind of information. So that is plan B. That's the second possibility of using such a software. There is a third one. Here we go, the keylogger. This was what I explained to you before. This was what happened in the beginning in the United States. That was the beginning of the discussion about the need of such an instrument. When you're using a proper technology to encrypt your information, you know this, I guess, better than anybody else. It is nearly impossible to decrypt this information by breaking the key. As long as the law enforcement agencies don't persuade you to give them the key, either by using social engineering or the force of the law, they will not be able to break the encryption and read what you have encrypted on your computer system. The files you've encrypted. They will only have encrypted files, but they don't know what there is in. So in these cases, it would be very interesting for the law enforcement agencies to have a possibility to break the encryption. There are two approaches. One approach is to limit the possibility or the capacity or the efficiency of such software tools. That means any software, any encryption software that is sold in the country is not allowed to have a better encryption than whatever. Any kind of encryption which is as bad as necessary that law enforcement agencies can break it within an appropriate period of time. That's the one approach, and we find it in a number of countries. Surprisingly big number of countries restrict the use of encryption technology in general or restrict the power of such tools. So it would be very interesting. This is the first approach to enable the law enforcement agencies to break the encryption. The second approach is a keylogger, which says, okay, anybody can use this. Oh, well, there are other approaches like escrow agreements, like opening an escrow agency, which stores the key that you're using, and if the law enforcement agency needs it, they get access to it. But the keylogger would be another option. That means if there is a suspect and the law enforcement agencies know he is using encryption technology to encrypt information, they could install such a remote forensic software to lock everything he's typing. And then they get access to the keylogger. This would be an option, and I have to say it open. I mean, this is something what we have to discuss before implementing restriction of the encryption technology for anybody. It might be an option to say, okay, we legalize the use of keyloggers by law enforcement agencies in specific cases to ensure that on the one hand side we have an effective encryption technology in place for anybody, but still enable the law enforcement agencies to break the encryption in cases where it is necessary by using such a keylogger. That would just be an option for the future. The next thing, and this is now really going into the direction of George Orwell now, the complete surveillance, we use the hardware that all the users already have in place. I mean, just look at the Apple PowerBooks. They have a camera installed inside, so I do not even have to carry it around with me. All of these devices have them. I have a microphone. So why not use these devices instead of entering the flat of the suspect again and installing little microphones everywhere? Wouldn't it be easier simply to use the existing hardware and activate it? That is another possibility, another function how this software could be used. Something of course which would be very interesting for the law enforcement agencies, because they wouldn't have to enter the room again. They wouldn't have to leave their equipment in and wouldn't have to run the risk that they're detected. So next possibility, that would give you the possibility to see what the people are doing. What are you doing while you're sitting in front of your computer? If you have them turned on all the time, especially the microphone, if they can secretly, I mean, webcam is something easy. You simply put something on the top in front of it, so they won't be able to act, even if they're activating it, they won't be able to see anything. But the microphone, pretty difficult to turn that effectively off. So that would be something what you would hardly recognize if they would turn it on, and what you could hardly prevent. Well, the last thing is identification of the suspect. So when we come to this part, where you know that with the use of anonymous communication services in the internet, you can hide your identity rather easily. I mean, many offenders are not making use of this kind of technology, so it's easy to trace them back. But if you would use such technology, it would nearly be impossible to trace you back, especially if you're sitting in a different country, you as an offender, than the victim. Okay, so what they would like to do is they would like to have the possibility to detect your real IP address. So you cannot hide your IP address behind the IP address of the provider who is offering the anonymous communication. No, they want your real IP address. And that would be another function that could be provided by the forensic software. They could store the IP address, the real IP address, and other information, serial numbers or any hardware number where you can really identify a computer and send this out to the investigation authorities. That would make such a system useless to hide your identity. So these are the options. I mean, another possibility, I mean, this is something which happens in the discussion all the time. When you say, no, we don't want such an instrument, there are a number of reasons why we shouldn't implement something like this. They always say, okay, then we do something else. We do not allow you to use anonymous communication services anymore. We do not allow you to use encryption technology anymore. So this is the option, but it is not. This is not how we should lead the discussion. We should look at each instrument and then decide, is this necessary and is it legal to implement something like this? And so we would look at the question, is it possible to restrict the use of encryption technology in Germany? Is it possible to restrict the possibilities of anonymous communication